Jesse, just so I'm clear on when you said that you wanted to refute attacks made in the latest ad, are you talking specifically about the ad that referenced an NPR interview from 2004?
Yeah.
And if so, could you talk more specifically about that ad and what's wrong with it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the latest ad that the opposition has put up over the weekend, you'll see a teacher from Boston, Massachusetts, talking about curriculum that happens in their side of things. Again, this has nothing to do with Maine law. This has nothing to do with what this question is about. This is an issue that happened in Massachusetts and has nothing to do with what we're faced with here in Maine.
Well, let's make this simple. Right? If you don't want something taught in your school, or you do want something taught in your school, then you contact your local school board. That's the way it's always been in Maine. That's the law of Maine. That was what the Attorney General's ruling pretty clearly said. So whether this referendum passes or doesn't pass, the question of whether same-sex marriages will be discussed in the schools will be a matter decided by the local school board, and people can disagree on that. But let's not get distracted from the vote that people are going to have to make in a couple of weeks.
Great. Any other questions? Yep.
I know you're saying the focus on schools and curricula is the wrong focus, but are you concerned that it is misleading viewers, or what kind of feedback are you hearing?
Well, I would just say that I think that their intention is to scare parents into thinking that something will be taught in schools that won't be taught in schools. The Maine legislature never discussed school curriculum. The Attorney General has been very clear that Maine law says that marriage is not part of curriculum, so anything about marriage will not be part of curriculum after this is passed. I think clearly they're not running a campaign talking about the merits of marriage for same-sex couples versus the merits of not allowing it. They're running a campaign trying to scare parents into thinking that this campaign will somehow impact their children and their children's curriculum. And it's false, but clearly they're desperate, and so their ads have gotten increasingly desperate, and it's frustrating as a supporter and as a believer in fairness and having voters understand the real facts to have the campaign continue to escalate. And I think the most recent ad escalated that same misleading falsehood about what will be taught in schools. And I think we're here today to say they've got to stop, but to clearly tell Maine voters that they are desperate, and that's why they've resorted to these tactics.
And I wonder, Jay, if you could clarify what the differences are between the Massachusetts law and the Maine law, because you were saying they're clearly different in governing curriculum.
Well, yeah, every state, under the state constitution, the question of education policy is uniquely reserved for the states, unless there's an intervening federal statute. And what I really meant to say in my opening remarks is to try to get people back on the initial theme, which is that people should be voting on this based on their own sense of right or wrong and justice, and not get distracted, frankly, into an arcane discussion about the differences of curriculum development in one state versus another, because it doesn't have anything to do with the vote. And so in a sense, to answer your question, implies running down a track which I don't think is going to help people make their decisions. But because there is a little professor in the particular answer is that each state develops their own curriculum in their own way. And here in Maine, we do have learning standards, and those learning standards are defined and broad outlines by the state and implemented by state school boards and local school boards, who make decisions certainly in terms of the content of this sort of issue. And so the real issue will be decided on a local school board basis, regardless of how the vote turns out.
I think I would just highlight again that the Commissioner of Education and the Attorney General scoured Maine law, and there was nowhere in law where the legislature has determined that marriage, even itself, of any kind of couple, should be part of Maine curriculum. So to continue to say that same-sex marriage will suddenly become part of curriculum is false. And as I think the former Attorney General stated, this will be up to local communities, but it's not part of curriculum now to discuss marriage. So to say that same-sex marriage will be part of curriculum, I think is again just trying to scare Maine voters.
And I think at some point you've just got to let the people that were elected and put in these positions do their jobs. The Commissioner of Education is not going to misrepresent what happens in Maine schools, and the Attorney General is certainly not going to misrepresent what happens in Maine law. So again, at some point, you have to let these people who are elected or put in these positions do their jobs. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Sorry it's so hot.